Well, originally, my first idea actually, when I started making concept art and, for myself as a hobby, um, kind of is just an impulsive thing. I've always been a person that sits around and has a very vivid imagination. So a lot of times I'll imagine things, and a lot of it is, I would say, due to, environment. Spending a lot of time outside, you see animals, things like that, you see people, and along with your imagination, you just kind of drift off and you imagine things, and then you usually take it a step further and you draw. So I was always good at drawing, even from like a young age. I was a little kid, I used to draw. I've always drawn monsters and things that would probably be interesting to see in like, sci-fi or whatever. So I would draw concepts in a lot of them, like they would be monsters, um, a lot of alien type of concepts, like space aliens, things like that. Sometimes mechanical things, but more or less more organic type of characters like monsters, hybrids of animal and people. But I don't know if you're familiar with the video game. It's not a famous video game because I think it was independently made. It was called, I think, The Black Heart, and it's a 2D fighting game. The way that it runs kind of like a lot of games you've seen before, like Darkstalkers, Mortal Kombat, things like that. Kind of like Street Fighter. Um, well, the funny thing was, I had realized that if I had taken enough time, well, I found I didn't have the time, but if I had enough time, what I could do was I could actually design my own 2D game. And the hardest part of it would be, you know, animating all the sprites, the coloring, the background. What I figured it would simply be just too much work. Um, Too much work for just me. If I had one part on a team of some sort, then I could understand, like amongst a certain amount of people, you could kind of easily make a game, like a decent 2D fighting game. There's programs like Game Maker and there's Mugen, that type of software, WinMugen and things like that. And there's all types of different programs, all types of Adobe programs and things like that. Um, but I was never really familiar with any of them. But what I ended up really doing, originally my idea was to do just that, was to make a game of my own. But I did not, I still don't want to spend all the time it would take to learn how to program and become so good at animating that I could actually, do that. So I just decided I would just experiment with animation software. And what I would do is I would take character concepts that I'd come up with and experiment with trying to animate them, trying to make them do certain things and play around with colors and see how it would actually look visually. And I found it's very enjoyable because it's like when you take just a sketch that has no color and it's just kind of like a figure drawing, just kind of a sketch of a character, and then you start to play around with like animating that character. It can be very time consuming, but at the same time, it can be really fun. So it's just kind of a thing I do for a hobby, you know. And I guess I would say that if the style I'm going for really is something that's kind of jarring, I guess, in a way. Like one part of me, I try to make the characters somewhat attractive, like very sensual looking, but at the same time, they're supposed to be very frightening. And I guess I'd imagine to the average person, looking at them, it would probably be kind of freaky, you know. Um, that's the way I could kind of describe it. Everyone has their own opinion when they look at something, the type of emotions they get. But I guess I would say that they're pretty freaky, in my opinion. But another thing I wanted to talk about or rant about was how there are alien animes, I guess, or whatever out there, anime series or whatever, or cartoons. But one thing that I guess you could say annoys me, not so much video games, because video games, in my opinion, video games have a lot of really diverse and in-depth type of extraterrestrial themed characters. But that's video games. But what I wish I would see more of would be more sci-fi movies and more anime that had more diverse type of characters. And I'm not talking about race when I say diverse. I just mean different types of characters. Like sometimes I feel like if they make alien characters or hybrid characters, they make them way too human or they make them way too alien. So they're way too animal. So it's just not quite. Doesn't seem to have what I'm really looking for when I draw a concept. It's just my ideas and it's my style. Not like it's super original or anything, but it just has my spin on it. And one of the main things that I enjoy about making characters is I have some martial arts background and knowledge on it. So when I make a character concept, some of the things like I'll make on a character that could look small to someone with a really untrained eye, they could just see like, for instance, it could be a spiny protrusion or something that comes out of an elbow or at a certain angle on like a forearm or something like that, and they might not really understand the degree of all the implications theoretically that something with that anatomy could actually do combatively, but I would. I could look right at something. It could take me like a couple seconds to look at something, and I could see a whole range of um, things that it would really be capable of doing. Um, Even it could be just as simple as like how it might be able to, I don't know, sort through laundry or something. Depending on how it's built and what type of extremities it has, like tentacles and spiny protrusions and certain types of limbs and certain angles, whether it has like a plantigrade foot or digitigrade or whatever, or tail, and certain types of horns on certain places and certain angles. Um, with my type of knowledge, I could see a lot of potential that could have. And then that also dictates how the character would probably fight. And not really probably, it's like kind of a must. And certain things also open up the possibility of flaws too, certain weaknesses, certain flaws that not everybody would see. But with my type of eye and my knowledge and my background, I could see a lot of things. But what I'm really saying is that I see kind of like not more or less the same, but I would like to see some different things in anime and also in movies. Like, for one thing, I would like to see more fight sequences in anime that are a little bit more realistic. I notice, like, obviously, when you're animating something, depending on your level of skill and how much time you're willing to put into it, you might um, go for a more over the top, cartoony anime type of fight sequence, and that's okay, and everyone's seen that before. But me, I'm more of a fan of a more realistic, more technical, more practical style of fighting that you would see in a movie or in an anime. And there's ways to do it. It just takes a little bit more knowledge. I mean, you got to be a pretty good animator, but you also have to understand just a little bit about martial arts, a little bit more about anatomy and physics, really, like real life physics, to understand how something would really look. and then you got to understand about like how things look in real time sometimes. Not saying it has to be hyper realistic, but at least I would like to see more or less of that, especially for some of these professionals. I mean, I've seen some of these animators um, in anime that are excellent. Like it's I don't even understand how someone could be that good at at animating something. I guess it's just years and years of experience. And even with some of the computer generated stuff I've seen, like the CGI stuff, which I'm sure that costs a lot more money to do that, especially if it's very, very, very like high quality, high resolution. Where you got like uh, monsters with all types of hair, and it looks super realistic. Like you see some of these new PS4 games and all this stuff. Um, I know how much work and time and effort goes into that. But what I would like to see is I would like to see more of less a real take on some of those things. And I know there's people that do like, they do fight choreography, they do motion capture and stuff. But then some of these movies, some of the fight sequences I see are like, I'm not ripping on them. Like some of them are really kind of just off the wall. But then some of them, like there's a lot of realism that they could bring to them, and it's very practical stuff. It's just I don't know, maybe the choreographer thought it would just look better to do something a certain way, or maybe they were just going for a certain type of look. Just like I'll give you an example. I was watching a clip from this movie. What was it called? The Gods of Egypt, and I know a lot of people rip on that movie, and I rip on it too a little bit because I really thought like it was nothing special. It was a bunch of CGI, but then the fight sequences, in my opinion, were just kind of stupid. Like this like weird you know, people flying through the air with weapons. There was this scene where a guy was fighting like maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, but they looked like fawns or satyrs or something. But the way that they fought was, in my opinion, was kind of stupid, and it just was so unrealistic and sloppy. Like these huge broad swings, and there was no. It was very little subtlety or technique to anything. Like as a real martial artist and as someone who knows how to use weapons in a very more refined way, and I'm no master, but I could kick your ass with a lot of things I could pick up. I could pick, it doesn't even have to be an actual weapon. I know how to improvise weapons. I could pick up a extension cord and not the cord itself. I mean the blunt part, basically the fat part of an extension cord, and whoop your ass with that if I wanted to. You know, you know, and you could use whatever you're trying to use, and I could pretty much defend myself with a number of things. So I know the little intricacies about things, just like, but the way they were fighting, it was in my opinion, it was retarded. It was like, you got these things hopping through the air for whatever reason, like that they're, I guess just to get an effect, like it's supposed to look cool. They jump up in the air and then you know they end up getting impaled or whatever, and the guy uses like one of their swords to block the other one, and in the gap it's so funny because like the rhythm of the fight, a lot of the sequences, it's like the time that it would literally take him to do that maneuver would it in reality, and just watching it, to me it just looks so blatantly fake, kind of like when you watch like wrestling, WWE wrestling, how it's just like if you know what a real fight is, you just kind of look at it and kind of laugh, like it's just funny, because it doesn't work like that. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like when I watched that movie, I looked at it like it was just kind of funny. It was ridiculous looking. I mean, don't get me wrong, the CGI for a movie where it's clearly CG was impressive. It was very impressive. The way that the monsters moves was impressive, but I just did not like. It just bugs me. Something about the way that they fought bugged me. I would like to see something really a lot more realistic than that, and a lot more practical. So that's what I mean about that. But as far as aliens and anime, um, it's something that I always loved and I never could seem to get enough of. Sometimes they can do it very cheesy, and when it's cheesy and it sucks. When it sucks, it sucks. If you do it wrong, you do it wrong. I don't know. Maybe someone could look at some of my concepts and some of the characters I draw and say I'm doing it completely wrong because that's just their taste. But I would definitely say that I would like to see more or less something different um, in terms of anime in like these spacey alien based type of animes.